The chandeliers inside Blackwood Manor blazed like captured stars, throwing golden light across polished marble floors and crystal glasses that sparkled in every direction. Outside, rows of elegant carriages stretched along Magnolia Avenue, while liveried footmen hurried to open doors for Charleston's wealthiest families. Every guest believed tonight would be remembered as the grandest charity gala the city had ever seen. Secretly, however, everyone had come for another reason. Nathaniel Blackwood. At 34, he was the richest railroad owner in the South, a decorated former cavalry officer, and the most eligible bachelor in Charleston. Newspapers called him the Iron Gentleman because he rarely smiled and never allowed emotion to influence business. He had rebuilt half the city's railway system after the war, owned cotton warehouses from Georgia to Louisiana, and could buy nearly every estate along the coast without emptying his bank account. Naturally, every ambitious family hoped their daughter would become the future Mrs. Blackwood. Ladies floated through the ballroom in silk gowns trimmed with pearls and lace. Their mothers whispered careful instructions behind feathered fans. Smile. Do not speak too much. Never disagree with Mr. Blackwood. Across the ballroom stood the Whitmore sisters, the most admired beauties of Charleston. Caroline wore emerald silk embroidered with tiny golden flowers. Beatrice shimmered beneath layers of ivory satin. Youngest sister Amelia looked almost angelic in pale lavender. Their father adjusted his expensive pocket watch before smiling proudly. "One of you will leave this house engaged," he declared quietly. The sisters exchanged confident smiles. After all, who could possibly compete with them? Near the orchestra, businessmen laughed over expensive cigars while politicians discussed elections and railroad contracts. Every conversation eventually returned to one subject. "Has Blackwood chosen anyone? I heard he's finally ready to marry. My cousin says he's already spoken with the Whitmore family." "No," another gentleman replied. "I heard he favors a judge's daughter from Savannah." Rumors traveled faster than the violin music. Yet the man himself stood alone on the second-floor balcony overlooking the ballroom. Nathaniel Blackwood rested both hands upon the carved oak railing. Below him swirled hundreds of elegant guests. Above him stretched complete silence. He had hosted dozens of gatherings exactly like this over the past decade. Every event looked identical. Different gowns, different musicians, different wines. The ambitions never changed. Every smile contained calculation. Every compliment expected payment. Every introduction carried hidden negotiations. Nathaniel had grown tired of reading people long ago. His sharp gray eyes drifted across the ballroom without interest until they stopped on someone entirely unexpected. Not one of Charleston's celebrated beauties. Not a governor's daughter. Not even one of the wealthy widows determined to capture his attention. Instead, a young woman in a simple cream-colored dress quietly poured fresh coffee into an elderly lady's china cup. She wasn't a servant. Nathaniel recognized most of the household staff. Nor was she behaving like one of the invited guests. She moved naturally between tables, helping wherever she noticed someone needed assistance. When an old gentleman struggled to reach his walking cane, she retrieved it before anyone else reacted. When an elderly widow accidentally dropped her lace handkerchief, the young woman picked it up with a warm smile and returned it without expecting thanks. She blended into the room so completely that almost no one noticed her. Nathaniel frowned slightly. "Who is she?" His elderly butler stepped beside him. "I believe that is Miss Eleanor Hayes, sir." "I don't recognize the name. She teaches at St. Mary's School for Orphan Children." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "A schoolteacher?" "Yes, sir." "Why is she serving coffee?" "The hostess found herself short of servants after several became ill this morning." Miss Hayes volunteered. Nathaniel watched her again. Most women fought desperately to stand near him. This one hadn't looked toward the balcony once. Interesting. His attention shifted as another familiar figure wandered into the ballroom. Samuel. Nathaniel's younger brother paused near one of the enormous grandfather clocks lining the entrance hall. Tall and broad-shouldered, Samuel looked every bit as impressive as his older brother until someone studied his expression. His brown eyes held the innocent wonder of a child discovering something new each day. While guests admired paintings and crystal chandeliers, Samuel admired gears. He walked directly toward the antique clock, ignoring everyone else. He knelt beside its polished wooden case and pressed one ear against it. Tick, tick, tick. A delighted smile spread across his face. "The rhythm is perfect," he whispered to himself. He removed a tiny notebook from his coat pocket and carefully wrote something inside before examining the brass pendulum swinging behind the glass. Several young gentlemen nearby exchanged amused glances. "There he is, the strange Blackwood brother. I heard he spends hours taking clocks apart. What a waste." Quiet laughter spread among them. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He knew those whispers. He had heard them for years. Ever since their parents died, Samuel had become the favorite target of Charleston's cruel elite. His younger brother possessed extraordinary mechanical talent, but because he struggled with crowded gatherings and complicated conversations, society dismissed him as peculiar. Nathaniel attended these events only because Samuel occasionally begged to hear live orchestras. Music calmed him, especially cellos. As the musicians tuned their instruments, Samuel closed his eyes. He smiled. The deep vibration of the cello seemed to settle something restless inside him. Nathaniel relaxed slightly. Perhaps tonight would pass peacefully after all. Unfortunately, Victor Langley had also received an invitation. Victor entered the ballroom with effortless confidence, dressed in an immaculate black tuxedo and carrying a crystal cup filled with steaming coffee. Tall, handsome, and endlessly charming, he appeared every inch the perfect Southern gentleman. Nathaniel knew better. Victor possessed the rare talent of humiliating others while making his insults sound like jokes. He noticed Samuel immediately. A slow smile appeared. "There is tonight's entertainment," Victor murmured to two companions. "What are you planning?" "Nothing serious." His friends chuckled. Victor casually began walking towards Samuel. From across the room, Eleanor noticed him. She recognized Victor Langley. Every teacher in Charleston knew his reputation. Children feared him. Workers despised him. Yet wealthy society continued welcoming him because his family's shipping company controlled half the city's harbor. Something about the way he approached Samuel unsettled her. She quietly set down the silver coffee pot. Without drawing attention, she started walking. Meanwhile, Samuel remained completely absorbed by the orchestra. The cello began its opening notes. His fingers tapped happily against his leg. Victor stopped directly behind him. "Oh, terribly sorry." He deliberately stumbled. The entire cup of hot coffee splashed across Samuel's light gray jacket. Dark stains spread instantly. The porcelain cup shattered across the marble floor. Several ladies gasped. Conversation stopped. Samuel froze. His breathing quickened. He stared silently at the wet stains soaking through his coat. It's hot," he whispered. Victor stepped backward dramatically. "My goodness," he exclaimed loudly. "You walked right into me." A few young men laughed. Someone muttered just loudly enough to hear. Perhaps they should have left him at home. More laughter. Samuel looked around in confusion. Too many faces. Too many voices. Too much noise. His breathing became uneven. His hands began trembling. Nathaniel pushed away from the balcony railing. "Not again." He started toward the staircase. If Victor thought this humiliation would go unanswered, he would learn otherwise. Before Nathaniel reached the first step, another figure stepped into the growing circle of spectators. Eleanor. She ignored Victor completely. Instead, she knelt beside Samuel. "You've been burned," she said calmly. Samuel nodded weakly. "It feels sticky." "It does." Her voice remained gentle without sounding childish. "Let's fix that first." She removed a clean white handkerchief from her pocket. Slowly, carefully, she dabbed the coffee from his jacket. "I'm sorry," Samuel whispered. "You've done nothing wrong." He said, "I bumped into him." Eleanor smiled softly. "I was watching." "You didn't." Samuel looked uncertain. "You saw." "I saw everything." For the first time since the accident, his breathing slowed slightly. Victor cleared his throat. "Miss Hayes, I believe you're mistaken." Only then did Eleanor look at him. Her expression remained perfectly polite. "I don't believe I am, Mr. Langley. You accuse me?" "I simply observed what happened." Victor laughed. Surely you're not choosing his version over mine. I'm choosing the truth. The surrounding crowd fell silent. Few people ever contradicted Victor publicly. Fewer still were poor school teachers. Victor's smile disappeared. You should remember your place. Eleanor stood. My place, she answered quietly, is beside someone being treated unfairly. Several older guests exchanged surprised glances. Nathaniel had stopped halfway down the staircase. He watched without moving. No fear, no hesitation. This woman had just challenged one of Charleston's wealthiest businessmen to defend a man almost everyone ignored. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She hadn't even looked toward him. Samuel tugged nervously at Eleanor's sleeve. My jacket. We'll clean it. It smells wrong. I know. She gently removed the stained coat. Breathe slowly. Samuel obeyed. The cello. I hear it. It helps. Then listen only to that. The orchestra continued playing. Gradually Samuel's shoulders relaxed. His eyes focused once more. You like clocks? Eleanor asked. His entire face brightened. You noticed? You were listening to the grandfather clock. It loses 4 seconds every hour. She blinked. You can hear that? He nodded enthusiastically. The gears drag. Can they be repaired? Oh yes. For the first time all evening, Samuel laughed. It was genuine, unrestrained. Nathaniel stared in disbelief. Doctors had struggled to calm Samuel during moments like these. Society certainly never could. Yet within minutes, a schoolteacher carrying nothing more than a handkerchief and quiet kindness had restored his brother's peace. Something shifted inside Nathaniel Blackwood. Not admiration. Not yet. Something far more dangerous. Hope. And for the first time in many years, the Iron Gentleman found himself unable to look away. The laughter from the ballroom still echoed faintly through Blackwood Manor long after the guests had begun dancing again, but Nathaniel Blackwood heard none of it. He remained on the staircase, watching Eleanor Hayes walk quietly back toward the refreshment tables as though nothing remarkable had happened. She neither searched the room for approval nor lingered near Charleston's influential families. She simply resumed pouring coffee, helping elderly guests, and speaking gently with anyone who needed assistance. Nathaniel had spent years studying people. Power always revealed itself in subtle ways. Some sought it through wealth, others through beauty, many through manipulation, but this woman seemed completely uninterested in all three. His old butler approached quietly. Shall I have Mr. Langley removed, sir? Nathaniel's eyes remained fixed on Eleanor. Not yet. And Miss Hayes? A long silence followed. Find out where she teaches. Yes, sir. The orchestra shifted into another lively waltz. Nathaniel descended the remaining staircase steps and crossed the ballroom, ignoring every hopeful smile directed toward him. The Whitmore sisters immediately noticed. Caroline adjusted her emerald necklace. He's coming. Beatrice lifted her fan gracefully. I told father. Amelia straightened her posture. Certain one of them would receive the first dance everyone had predicted. Instead, Nathaniel walked directly past them, without slowing, without even noticing them. The three sisters stared after him in disbelief. He continued towards Samuel. His younger brother was now happily discussing clocks with Eleanor beside one of the enormous windows overlooking the gardens. Samuel held his little notebook open. Look. Eleanor leaned closer. Inside were dozens of tiny sketches, clock gears, steam engines, bridge supports, railroad wheels. Every page contained precise mechanical drawings far beyond what most engineers could produce. You drew all these? Samuel nodded proudly. They help me think. They're extraordinary. No one says that. They should. Samuel smiled so widely that Nathaniel felt something tighten inside his chest. He could count on one hand the number of strangers who had spoken to Samuel without pity. Eleanor wasn't pretending. She was genuinely fascinated. Nathaniel finally stepped forward. Samuel. His brother looked up immediately. Nate, you've met Miss Hayes. Samuel nodded enthusiastically. She likes clocks. I can see that. Nathaniel turned toward Eleanor. Up close she looked even simpler than she had from the balcony. No expensive jewelry. No elaborate hairstyle. only intelligent brown eyes and a calm confidence that seemed impossible to disturb. Miss Hayes. Mr. Blackwood. She offered a polite nod. Nothing more. No exaggerated curtsy. No nervous excitement. No attempt to flatter him. I wanted to thank you. There is no need. There is. She shook her head gently. I only did what anyone should have done. Nathaniel almost smiled. If everyone believed that, tonight would have ended differently. For a brief moment their eyes met. There was something unusual about hers. They weren't impressed by his reputation, nor intimidated. They simply saw him as another human being, an unfamiliar feeling. Samuel interrupted happily. She knows teachers. Nathaniel looked confused. Teachers? She teaches children. I see. They ask funny questions. Eleanor laughed softly. They ask hundreds every day. Samuel considered this. I would like that. You'd answer everyone. I think so. Nathaniel watched the conversation unfold effortlessly. Samuel almost never maintained conversations with strangers this long. Yet with Eleanor, words seemed easier. The orchestra announced dinner. Guests slowly drifted toward the enormous dining hall. Nathaniel extended one arm. Miss Hayes. Yes. Would you join us? She hesitated. I wasn't seated with the principal guests. You are now. Several nearby conversations stopped instantly. Nathaniel Blackwood had never invited an unknown schoolteacher to dine beside him. The Whitmore sisters looked positively horrified. Victor Langley glared from across the room. Eleanor noticed every staring face. I appreciate your kindness, she answered carefully, but I'd rather remain where I was assigned. Nathaniel studied her. Because of the gossip? Because those seats belong to people expecting them. They'll survive. She smiled faintly. I'm sure they will, but I have no wish to make anyone else's evening more uncomfortable. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Interesting. She declined the most sought-after seat in Charleston without a second thought. Very well. Samuel looked disappointed. Can we visit your school? Eleanor blinked. My school? You said children build little machines. They try. I want to see. She smiled warmly. If your brother agrees. Nathaniel answered before Samuel could. We'll discuss it. Samuel accepted that answer. For now. Late that evening, the final guests departed beneath the glow of gas lamps lining the long driveway. The Whitmore family left first. Caroline climbed into the carriage in complete silence. Her father slammed the carriage door harder than necessary. What happened? I don't know. He ignored all three of you. Beatrice frowned. He spent the evening watching a schoolteacher. Nonsense. It wasn't nonsense. Amelia quietly added. I think he admired her. Their father stared through the carriage window toward Blackwood Manor. No. His voice carried more hope than certainty. He'll come to his senses. Inside the now empty ballroom, servants extinguished candles one by one. Nathaniel stood beside the fireplace while Samuel carefully packed away his notebook. You enjoyed yourself? Samuel nodded. Because of Miss Hayes. I noticed. Can we see her again? Nathaniel looked thoughtfully into the dying fire. Perhaps. Samuel brightened. Tomorrow? We'll see. You always say that. Nathaniel couldn't argue. Samuel yawned. I'm tired. I know. As they climbed the staircase together, Samuel suddenly stopped. Nate. Yes. She talked to me like everyone else. Nathaniel looked at him. No. Samuel tilted his head. What? She talked to you better than everyone else. Samuel smiled quietly before continuing upstairs. Nathaniel remained standing in the hallway long after his brother disappeared. One sentence refused to leave his thoughts. She talked to you better than everyone else. The following morning dawned bright and unusually cool. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows inside Blackwood Manor as Nathaniel sat alone in his study reading reports from railroad supervisors. Normally numbers settled his mind. Today they refused to hold his attention. Every few minutes he found himself remembering Eleanor kneeling beside Samuel. The steady voice, the complete absence of fear, the genuine curiosity. A knock interrupted his thoughts. His butler entered carrying a small leather folder. You requested information regarding Miss Eleanor Hayes. Nathaniel accepted it. Inside lay only a few handwritten pages. Name: Eleanor Grace Hayes. Age: 26. Occupation: teacher at St. Mary's School. Residence: small farmhouse outside Charleston with her widowed Aunt Margaret. Income: very modest. Known charitable work: teaching orphan children, delivering books to isolated farming families, volunteering at church kitchens, repairing school supplies with her own wages. Nathaniel slowly lowered the papers. That's all? Yes, sir. No wealthy relatives? No. Political connections? None. Business interests? None whatsoever. The butler hesitated before adding, several people described her as stubborn. Nathaniel looked up. In what way? She refuses donations unless they're needed for the children. A faint smile appeared. I see. The butler cleared his throat. May I speak freely? You always do. I believe Miss Hayes genuinely has no interest in your fortune. Nathaniel leaned back. That's exactly what troubles me. The old servant laughed quietly. For most gentlemen, that would be a blessing. For me, Nathaniel closed the folder. It is something I've never encountered. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, St. Mary's School buzzed with cheerful noise. Nearly 40 children filled the small wooden classroom. Eleanor moved between worn desks, helping students solve arithmetic problems. A little girl raised her hand. Miss Hayes? Yes, Lucy? Is it true you met Mr. Blackwood? Several children immediately looked up. I attended his charity gala. Did you dance? No. Did he ask you? No. Is he scary? The classroom erupted into laughter. Eleanor smiled. Finish your multiplication first. Just then another teacher hurried through the doorway. Eleanor. What is it? Someone's here to see you. I have visitors? The older woman nodded toward the window. Outside, standing beside an elegant black carriage bearing the Blackwood family crest, was Nathaniel Blackwood himself. The entire classroom rushed toward the windows. Children pressed their faces against the glass. He's here. The railroad man. He has beautiful horses. Eleanor took one slow breath, then calmly walked outside. Nathaniel removed his hat. Miss Hayes. Mr. Blackwood. I hope I'm not interrupting. You've certainly interrupted arithmetic. He almost laughed. Almost. I wanted to thank you properly. You already did. No. He glanced toward the laughing children inside. I don't believe I have. Eleanor folded her hands. What brings you here? Nathaniel looked directly into her eyes. I have a proposal. She raised one eyebrow. I think Charleston's orphan children deserve a proper school. Eleanor remained silent. And I believe, Nathaniel continued, you are the right person to help build it. She looked at him carefully. For the first time, she realized this unexpected visit might change far more than either of them could possibly imagine. The invitation to rebuild St. Mary's School became the talk of Charleston before the sun had finished crossing the afternoon sky. By evening, every drawing room, gentlemen's club, and church gathering buzzed with the same rumor. Nathaniel Blackwood has been seen visiting a schoolteacher. He personally drove to the orphanage. They say she's already convinced him to fund a new academy. Others were far less charitable. She's clever. She knew exactly how to reach him. The brother was only her stepping stone. No rumor traveled faster than one born from jealousy. Eleanor ignored every word. She continued teaching children exactly as she had before. Nathaniel, meanwhile, refused to explain himself to anyone. Within 2 weeks, construction began on a brand-new schoolhouse funded entirely by Blackwood Railways. It wasn't merely another charity. Nathaniel insisted it include a mechanical workshop, a reading library, and classrooms filled with proper desks instead of broken benches. When Eleanor questioned the enormous expense, Nathaniel answered simply, if we're going to build something, we'll build it to last. Samuel became the happiest man in Charleston. Every morning he rode with Nathaniel to the construction site, carrying notebooks filled with ideas. The children adored him. Instead of laughing at his unusual habits, they gathered around while he demonstrated tiny wooden machines. This gear turns this wheel. If this axle becomes longer, the bridge becomes stronger. Little boys and girls stared with wide eyes. One afternoon, an 8-year-old asked, Mr. Samuel, Are you an inventor? Samuel blinked. I think so. You make impossible things. Samuel smiled. No one ever called them impossible before. Eleanor watched quietly from across the classroom. You found your students, she said. Samuel looked toward the laughing children. They listen. They do. They don't laugh. They're learning. Nathaniel stood in the doorway watching the scene unfold. His brother had spent years hidden away from society. Now, children followed him everywhere. For the first time since their parents died, Samuel looked like a man with purpose instead of someone merely surviving. Nathaniel silently thanked Eleanor every single day. Not everyone celebrated the new school. Victor Langley watched the growing project with increasing resentment. His family's shipping company had recently lost several transportation contracts to Blackwood Railways. Businessmen whispered that Nathaniel's reputation for generosity made him nearly impossible to compete against. Victor blamed Eleanor. If she hadn't appeared, he'd still be the cold businessman everyone feared. Instead, newspapers praised Nathaniel weekly. The railroad tycoon funding education. The Iron Gentleman softens. Blackwood builds future for Charleston's children. Victor slammed the newspaper onto his office desk. I'll destroy every bit of that admiration. His accountant shifted uneasily. What are you planning? Victor smiled. Something unfortunate. Construction of Blackwood's largest railway warehouse was nearly complete. The enormous brick building stood beside the harbor, designed to store cotton, machinery, and imported steel before distribution across the South. Nathaniel planned to inspect the building personally before opening it. Samuel insisted on coming. I want to see the steam engines. Nathaniel laughed quietly. I expected that. Eleanor had also been invited because several classrooms would receive donated supplies from the warehouse. The three arrived together early one warm Friday morning. Workers greeted Nathaniel respectfully. Morning, Mr. Blackwood. Everything ready? Nearly. Inside the warehouse, dozens of men carried wooden crates, while engineers tested massive steam-powered lifting equipment. Samuel wandered excitedly between giant machines. His eyes shone brighter with every discovery. So many gears, so many belts. He carefully examined each mechanism while scribbling notes. Eleanor smiled. You look happier than Christmas morning. Samuel nodded enthusiastically. They built everything correctly. Nathaniel chuckled. I certainly hope so. Across the building, Victor Langley stood hidden behind stacks of freight crates. No one noticed him. Earlier that morning, he'd bribed one temporary laborer, one damaged steam valve, one overturned lantern, one carefully loosened fuel pipe. Everything else would happen on its own. Victor quietly disappeared through the rear entrance. An hour later, Nathaniel met with foreman in the shipping office. Eleanor organized donated books. Samuel continued exploring the machinery. Suddenly, a loud hiss echoed through the warehouse. Several workers looked toward the boiler room. What was that? Another hiss. Much louder. Steam burst violently through a cracked pipe. An engineer shouted, "Pressure's climbing." Before anyone could react, boom! The explosion shook the entire building. Windows shattered instantly. Wooden beams groaned. Flames erupted along one side of the warehouse, where oil barrels ignited. Men screamed. Smoke filled the air within seconds. Fire! Everybody out! Workers ran in every direction. Heavy crates crashed onto the floor. Burning timber rained from the ceiling. Nathaniel turned immediately. Samuel. No answer. His heart froze. Eleanor. I'm here. She emerged through thick smoke, coughing violently. Samuel's still inside. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. Stay outside. I'm coming with you. No. He's terrified of loud noises. Nathaniel stared at her. She was right. Samuel wouldn't respond to strangers. He'd respond to Eleanor. Nathaniel nodded once. Stay close. They wrapped wet cloths across their mouths and rushed into the burning warehouse. Inside, visibility disappeared beneath black smoke. Flames crawled across wooden beams overhead. Workers stumbled blindly toward exits. Nathaniel shouted, Samuel. Only echoes answered. Then, far deeper inside, a familiar voice. Nate, I'm here. Nathaniel ran toward the sound. He found Samuel kneeling beside a gigantic steam engine. Instead of fleeing, Samuel stared upward at the shaking support beams. "The machine's wrong." Nathaniel grabbed his shoulder. "We have to leave." Samuel shook his head urgently. "The ceiling. What about it? It'll fall." Nathaniel looked upward. Several enormous beams had already cracked. Smoke hid the rest. Samuel pointed toward the floor. "The railway tunnel." Nathaniel frowned. "What tunnel?" "The maintenance passage." Eleanor immediately understood. "The one beneath the loading platform?" Samuel nodded rapidly. "It goes outside." Nathaniel looked around. "Can everyone fit?" "Yes. But—" Samuel pointed toward a massive fallen beam blocking the trapdoor. "It's trapped." Nathaniel shoved against the timber. It refused to move. More workers gathered nearby. "The exit's blocked." Smoke thickened. Several men collapsed coughing. Time was disappearing. Samuel suddenly looked around wildly. "Chain." "What?" "I need the lifting chain." Nathaniel understood instantly. The enormous overhead crane still hung above them. If powered manually, it might lift the beam. Samuel raced toward the control wheel. Nathaniel grabbed him. "It's dangerous." "I know how." There wasn't another choice. Nathaniel released him. Samuel climbed onto the machinery, ignoring sparks and falling ash. He examined gears with astonishing speed. "This lever." "No." "This one." He pulled a release pin. Nothing happened. Smoke rolled around them. Samuel closed his eyes. Listening. Tick. Click. Grinding metal. "There." He pulled another lever. The massive chain suddenly lowered. Nathaniel and 4 workers wrapped it around the fallen beam. Samuel turned the enormous crank. The gears groaned. Slowly, painfully, the beam lifted. "Move!" Nathaniel shouted. Workers dragged unconscious men toward the trapdoor. Eleanor pulled bookshelves aside until the hidden entrance appeared beneath the floor. "It's open." One by one, frightened workers disappeared into the tunnel. Nathaniel counted constantly. 21, 22, 23. Only Samuel remained above. "Come on." Samuel looked upward again. The machine's still turning. "Leave it. It'll explode." Nathaniel lost patience. "Samuel," before he could move. Another explosion rocked the warehouse. Burning timber crashed exactly where Samuel had been standing seconds earlier. Eleanor screamed. Nathaniel sprinted through flames. He tackled Samuel just as another section of roof collapsed behind them. The brothers hit the floor hard. Nathaniel dragged Samuel toward the tunnel while burning debris crashed all around them. Seconds later, the entire roof collapsed. Outside, firefighters pumped water desperately. Thick black smoke covered the harbor. Crowds gathered silently. Then, the maintenance tunnel opened. One worker emerged. Then another. Then another. Finally, Nathaniel climbed out carrying Samuel over one shoulder while Eleanor helped an injured laborer beside him. The crowd erupted. They made it. Everyone survived. Firefighters rushed toward the exhausted survivors. Samuel looked around in confusion. Did everyone leave? Nathaniel checked quickly. Every foreman, every engineer, every laborer, every volunteer. Not one missing. Nathaniel placed both hands on Samuel's shoulders. "You saved them." Samuel blinked. "I did." The tunnel, the crane, the gears. Samuel looked down shyly. "I just listened." Nathaniel pulled him into a fierce embrace. "I should have listened sooner." Eleanor smiled through smoke-stained tears. The workers began applauding, one after another. Soon the entire dock echoed with applause. Not for Nathaniel. For Samuel. The shy inventor lowered his head, overwhelmed. "I've never—" He couldn't finish. Nathaniel understood anyway. Later that afternoon, investigators searched the burned warehouse. One inspector approached Nathaniel carrying a damaged metal valve. This wasn't an accident. Nathaniel looked sharply at him. "What do you mean?" The fuel line was deliberately loosened. Another detective arrived moments later. "We've arrested one laborer." He confessed. Nathaniel's expression hardened. "Who hired him?" The detective hesitated, then quietly answered. Victor Langley. Silence fell. Eleanor closed her eyes. She had suspected jealousy. She never imagined murder. Victor had intended to destroy a warehouse. Instead, he had nearly killed dozens of innocent people. Nathaniel looked toward the smoking ruins. His voice became colder than steel. He'll answer for every life he endangered. By sunset, the truth had spread across Charleston. Victor Langley was arrested for conspiracy, arson, and attempted murder. His business collapsed overnight. Banks froze his accounts. The compassionate teacher who refused to abandon him, trading partners abandoned him. Society turned against the man who had once mocked others without consequence. For the first time, Charleston understood who the true gentleman had always been. It wasn't the wealthy man with perfect manners. It was the quiet inventor who saved lives, and the brother who would have walked through fire to bring him home. The smoke had barely disappeared from Charleston's harbor before the city began rewriting its story. For years, people had spoken of Nathaniel Blackwood with equal parts admiration and fear. They respected his fortune. They feared his coldness. Now, newspapers carried a different headline: the railroad magnate who risked his life for his workers. Another newspaper printed an even larger photograph. Quiet inventor saves dozens during harbor fire. For the first time in his life, Samuel Blackwood wasn't being remembered as the wealthy man's unusual younger brother. He was being recognized as a hero. Everywhere he went, workers tipped their hats. Children waved excitedly. Engineers asked to see his notebook filled with mechanical sketches. The attention embarrassed him. "I didn't do anything special," he quietly told Eleanor one afternoon. She smiled while arranging books inside the nearly completed school library. "You saved 38 people. I only found the tunnel. You also lifted a 20-foot beam." Samuel scratched the back of his neck. "I forgot that part." Eleanor laughed. "You usually do." Nathaniel stood nearby watching them. He had spent most of his adult life trying to protect Samuel from the world. He suddenly realized something remarkable. Eleanor wasn't protecting Samuel from the world. She was teaching the world how to appreciate Samuel. That difference changed everything. Construction on St. Mary's Academy finished 3 weeks later. The old wooden schoolhouse had become one of the finest educational buildings in South Carolina. Large windows filled every classroom with sunlight. Shelves overflowed with brand-new books. Maps covered the walls. A mechanical workshop occupied the entire rear wing. Children crowded around Samuel before the ribbon-cutting ceremony even began. "Mr. Samuel, look, I finished my bridge. I built the water wheel." Samuel knelt beside them, examining every project with complete seriousness. "This beam is stronger. Try a bigger gear." "Excellent work." Nathaniel smiled quietly. He had never seen his brother so completely at peace. Eleanor walked beside him. "You should be proud." "I am. You've changed hundreds of lives." Nathaniel looked toward the laughing children. "I thought I was building a school." "Weren't you?" He shook his head. "I think you build a family." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The afternoon breeze carried the sound of children's laughter across the schoolyard. Nathaniel looked at Eleanor. "I've spent years building railroads." She looked back. "They connect cities." "They do. But you've connected people." She lowered her eyes modestly. "I only listened." "No," Nathaniel answered softly. "You cared." Not everyone celebrated the new beginning. Miles away, inside the Whitmore estate, frustration had turned into desperation. Richard Whitmore slammed another newspaper onto his dining table. "This is ridiculous." Caroline folded her arms. "Father." "No." He interrupted sharply. "We waited too long." Beatrice sighed. "He clearly isn't interested." "He will be." Amelia quietly asked, "What if he loves someone else?" Silence filled the room. Richard looked toward the family portrait hanging above the fireplace. "If Nathaniel Blackwood marries that schoolteacher, our influence disappears. Our business opportunities disappear. Our future disappears." He stood abruptly. "I'm going to Blackwood Manor." Nathaniel received Richard Whitmore in his study the following afternoon. After polite conversation and tea, Richard finally revealed his purpose. "I'll speak plainly. I expected nothing less. My eldest daughter Caroline is prepared to marry. Nathaniel remained silent. Richard continued. Our families together would become the strongest commercial partnership in the South. Nathaniel leaned back. I'm listening. I'll merge every Whitmore shipping route with Blackwood Railways. He slid several legal papers across the desk. Millions in new contracts. Nathaniel glanced at them, then calmly pushed them back. I appreciate the offer. Richard smiled confidently. So, my answer is no. The smile disappeared. You haven't even considered it. I considered it before you arrived. Richard frowned. You'd reject the greatest business merger in Charleston? Yes. Because of that teacher? Nathaniel's eyes hardened. Her name is Eleanor Hayes. Richard realized he had gone too far. You'll regret this. Nathaniel stood. No. His voice was calm. I would regret accepting. The meeting ended moments later. By sunset, word of Nathaniel's refusal had spread throughout Charleston. People were stunned. The city's richest bachelor had rejected wealth itself. For a woman with neither fortune nor famous family. A week later, Nathaniel made a decision. He opened the safe inside his study. From a velvet box, he removed a ring that had belonged to his mother. A delicate diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires. His butler entered quietly. You wish to see me, sir? Nathaniel held up the ring. I'm going to ask Miss Hayes to marry me. The elderly servant smiled warmly. I've been expecting this. Nathaniel laughed. Was it that obvious? Only to everyone except you. That evening, Blackwood Manor prepared for a celebration. Nathaniel planned to propose privately after dinner. Samuel seemed unusually quiet all afternoon. Eleanor noticed. Are you feeling all right? Samuel nodded. I'm thinking. About what? He hesitated. If people marry, they usually live together. Yes. You'll leave. Eleanor gently placed one hand on his shoulder. I'll still visit, but it won't be the same. She saw a genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of change. Fear of losing another person he loved. Before she could answer, guests arrived for dinner. Samuel quietly slipped away unnoticed. Nearly an hour later, Nathaniel asked, Where's Samuel? No one knew. Servants searched every room. The gardens, the stables, the greenhouse. Nothing. Nathaniel's face turned pale. He wouldn't leave without telling me. Eleanor suddenly remembered something Samuel had mentioned weeks earlier. The old clock tower. Nathaniel looked at her. What? He said it's the quietest place in Charleston. Without another word, both hurried toward the carriage. The abandoned clock tower stood on a grassy hill overlooking the harbor. Its giant clock had stopped decades earlier. Only pigeons and wind disturbed the silence. Eleanor climbed the narrow staircase first. At the very top, she found Samuel sitting beside the enormous motionless clock mechanism. His notebook rested in his lap. You found me. She sat beside him. I guessed. He looked toward the city lights. If you marry Nathaniel, I hope to. You'll have a different family. She shook her head gently. No, you won't need me. Eleanor smiled sadly. Oh, Samuel. She reached for his notebook. Opening it carefully, she found dozens of new drawings. A magnificent grandfather clock, decorated with flowers, tiny children, railroad tracks, and 3 figures standing together. You drew us. Samuel nodded. It's for your wedding. Tears filled Eleanor's eyes. You've been building this? For months. She turned another page. Detailed measurements covered every corner. Every gear had been carefully planned. Every carving thoughtfully designed. It's beautiful. Samuel whispered, I wanted your house to sound happy. Eleanor gently took his hand. Listen to me. He looked up. I didn't become your friend because of Nathaniel. I know. I became your friend because you're one of the kindest people I've ever met. You won't leave? She smiled. I'll always be your family. Samuel's shoulders relaxed. Just then, footsteps echoed up the staircase. Nathaniel appeared, breathing hard after climbing hundreds of stairs. Relief flooded his face the moment he saw Samuel safe. Without saying a word, he hugged his younger brother tightly. I thought I'd lost you. I'm sorry. Nathaniel looked at Eleanor. He was worried. I know. Samuel quietly handed Nathaniel the notebook. Nathaniel slowly turned each page. When he reached the wedding clock design, his eyes became wet. "You made this?" Samuel nodded. "For your wedding." Nathaniel closed the notebook carefully, then looked toward Eleanor. At that moment, he knew there would never be a more perfect place. He stepped closer. From his pocket, he removed the velvet ring box. "Eleanor Hayes." She smiled through tears. "You climbed a clock tower to propose?" "I wasn't planning to, but life seems happier when plans change." He opened the box. The diamond caught the fading sunset. "I've built railroads across this country. I've made fortunes. I've signed contracts worth more money than I could ever spend." He took one slow breath. "But nothing I've ever built compares to what you've given Samuel." He looked directly into her eyes. "You taught my brother that he belongs. You taught me that strength isn't measured by power. It's measured by kindness." He gently took her hands. "I don't want another business partner. I don't need another social victory. I simply want you. Eleanor, will you marry me?" She laughed softly through happy tears. "I thought you'd never ask. Is that a yes?" She nodded. "It's always been yes." Nathaniel slipped the ring onto her finger. The diamond fit perfectly. Samuel clapped enthusiastically. "It worked." Nathaniel laughed. "It certainly did." 2 months later, Charleston gathered once again. Not inside a grand ballroom. Not beneath glittering chandeliers. Instead, friends, workers, teachers, engineers, and dozens of children filled a small white chapel overlooking green fields. The Whitmore sisters attended quietly. Even they smiled when Eleanor walked down the aisle. Samuel stood proudly beside Nathaniel as best man. Behind the altar stood the magnificent grandfather clock he had spent months building. As the minister declared them husband and wife, Samuel gently started the pendulum. Tick, tick, tick. The deep, steady rhythm echoed through the chapel. Nathaniel looked toward the beautiful clock before turning to his new wife. "When I first saw you," he whispered, "everyone else was trying to impress me. You were simply serving coffee." Eleanor smiled. "I was only helping. You changed my life." "No." She squeezed his hand gently. "We changed each other's." Outside the chapel, children released hundreds of white doves into the bright blue sky. Workers from Blackwood Railways cheered. Teachers applauded. Engineers lifted Samuel onto their shoulders while laughing. Years later, Charleston would remember Nathaniel Blackwood as one of the South's greatest railroad builders. But those who truly knew him remembered something far more important. They remembered the wealthy man who discovered that compassion was worth more than fortune. They remembered the quiet schoolteacher who transformed an entire city without seeking recognition. And they remembered the gentle inventor whose handmade wedding clock continued ticking faithfully for generations, reminding every child who visited St. Mary's Academy that the strongest foundations were never built with bricks or steel. They were built with kindness, courage, and love.